Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for looking at this watercolor for me.
Yeah, of course.
This is an Ian Ramsay, and he's actually born outside of London, or Kent. So I know you know about England.
Yes.
So
It's quite well done, loose foliage. I like how he's preserved the whites in the building without going in too much later with gouache. It's a very convincing reflection on the bridge, this beautiful bridge.
yeah, I wasn't going to take this piece, but because it looks more kind of like what would you'd sell in Santa Barbara. But this fly fisherman here.
Yeah, that adds a nice touch, I think, in sort of context of. I would imagine that this is probably done from a drawing, and then maybe some photographs as well to take home. Watercolor is quite difficult to get this level of detail like on site, but these do look like they've been drawn from a pencil sketch. Maybe a color study in plein air that he's then worked on. It's quite difficult to bring something up to this degree of finish plein air, but he could have started it plein air and then taken it home to the studio and worked out detail.
I don't paint with watercolor. What do you mean by finish? What are you looking for?
Well, the detail in the windows, that would have had to been put in after it's dried for a few hours. This is quite rough texture, cold pressed watercolor paper. So it takes a little bit of time for that to dry and then be able to work in with another layer of another pass of detail. So you could have done one rough sketch maybe to the level of detail in the background, plein air, and then sort of gone in later and worked up these areas to be much more finished. To get to this level of like brightness or darkness, brightness of color or darkness of shadow, takes a significant amount of layers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Ian Ramsay. I'm a watercolor artist. I'm just about to start a painting. It's a small rural scene. It's an idea that I developed from some sketches I did in the town of Charleston, Utah, which is in northern Utah. And then I did a small watercolor sketch of it, which I've sat up there. And now I'm going to try a larger one. I liked what I did there, so I want to just see if I can accomplish the same feel, which is kind of harder to do sometimes in a larger painting. The first thing I'm going to do is take a nice large brush and lay on a sky wash. So first I'm just going to put a little bit of water over the entire sky. Now I have some trees popping up through that, and I'm just going to paint through those. I'm not going to worry about them for the time being. I certainly wouldn't paint around them, but I am painting around some background mountains. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay in a little bit of warm color right in the center of the painting in the sky, just to give the painting a sense of bright focused light. So that it's going to go right in there, a nice big brush. I always like to work with big brushes as much as possible. And then as the painting goes along, then the brushes tend to get smaller. But I do love working with large brushes. You wouldn't think that to look at my work because there's so much detail in my work, which is, something I do. Right now I'm working with a large brush, a 2-inch flat brush. I'm going to lay in it. I just put the sort of yellowy orange color that I want to be a focus. Now I'm going to lay in a little bit of blue sky, very light, so I can come in later and maybe add in some sort of definition in the sky. So I'm going to sort of cast that around there, put some clean water on the brush, and just draw those two colors together. Now I'm going to take the same brush and create a general color for the bottom of the painting, for the foreground. And there's going to be a variety of colors, but I want to start off with just a general warm color. This is essentially going to be a warm painting. So I've got a little yellow ochre, a little raw sienna, and some burnt umber. And I'm just going to paint that over everything. Dry brush here. I work more dry brush than I do washy. It's just my style. It's just the way I like to work. So let's get that. This is just an underground color. That's an underlaying color that will be built upon as I carry on with the painting. Draw that up a little bit. All right. Then I'm going to come in and just lay a few other quickie colors in there before I let it dry for this stage. So I'm going to take a fan brush. I like to work with these stiff fan brushes. Here's a good one. And just let some of these colors that are poking into the sky, like from the trees, just blend in with the sky at this stage. I love working with these fan brushes because you can get such a variety of edges with. This is a stiff fan brush. This isn't one of the soft nylon types. This is a stiff, I think perhaps goat hair, that is probably more commonly used in oil painting. But it works fine for the way I've developed my style. Alright, so I have to let that bit dry. Alright, I'm back again. This painting, as I've done it so far, has dried. So, and it's dried to the touch, it's nice and flat. I don't stretch my paper. I just put it down, staple the edges, and tape it. And it stays mighty flat, especially when it's finished. It has really nice flatness to it. Stretching the paper, I find, puts too much tension in the painting. Anyway, so now I'm going to do a wee bit more on the sky. So I'm going to take some ultramarine blue, a little ultramarine violet, right? Create a color. I just add a little bit of composition to the sky. I'm not really looking about making a real, you know, highly defined sky. This is using another fan brush, this time a bigger one. All right, let's get that color right. A little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of ultramarine violet. Okay, I'm just looking at composition and you know, shapes now. I'm not looking at some sort of properly defined sky. I find that I use the sky as a directional element, so that I can direct the eye to the rest of the painting. It's not a sky painting. It's a painting where the sky helps the painting work. All right, a little bit more there. Soften those edges with some clean water. Maybe reinforce a few little weighty spots. Like that. See, I'm still just using that fan brush. Like I say, I love these things. And I will not do anything more on that sky for the time being. I will let it dry. I think I need a little bit more weight right in there, so I'm just using the straight ultramarine blue. So really, I'm kind of working, I worked wet on dry, now I'm working wet into semi-wet. Okay, that will be the basis of the sky. And I'll have to let that dry before I carry on. That was a painting I did, obviously, in 1993. And by the way it's framed, I can tell that it was sold at New Masters Gallery in Carmel, California. They did a lot of my work and have done over the years. I mean, they were the second gallery I think I ever got connected to. And this was a painting of a river scene in the north of England. I'm from England. I don't sound it, I know, but I spent a lot of time in England, and it's where I was born and raised, and where my wife and I got married, and where I worked for quite a few years. So I still paint a lot of English scenes. But this is pretty representative of the work I was doing back in the 90s. That sort of coloring, I mean, the buildings, the shapes, the composition is basically what I'm still doing. But the coloring is different. I mean, I've evolved since then, and my work has gotten more colorful, brighter, and it's just different. You know, you change. 30 years, you change, you grow, you see the work of other artists, you're influenced, you become your own best critic, and you have to move on. And that's what I've done. I've tried to grow as an artist.
I've noticed your artwork is becoming more sort of loose, representational, with the lines, taking a little bit more liberty.
I am. You know, I'm greatly influenced by some incredible impressionist watercolors that are around today and in the past. And I can't say that they have dictated the direction, but they have influenced things like color, composition, especially line work. And I mean, here I am, have been in this business for over 45 years, and I still alter my approach every single day. But I'm much more critical of my work now than I ever used to be. And I think it's because of the influence of some of the really, truly tremendous watercolor artists in the world today.
Ian's been one of our main artists since I bought the gallery, so we've had great success with Ian's watercolors. He's been in Brushworks forever, you know, and Ian was one of the 5 or 6 artists he had. Brushworks has been open since 1976. I bought it in 2000. So I'd been an art collector for 40 years before I bought the gallery. So, you know, it's just loved art, knew a lot of artists, owned a lot of art myself, and just wanted to become, you know, have a business selling art. I have a combination of oils and some pastels and some watercolors. So that's where I got to know Ian well. We've sold a lot of his paintings, and I continue to get great paintings in and sell them for him. And it's a medium I've always really enjoyed. I own watercolors myself and own Ian's paintings, and I love them. It's I still think it's a great medium, but I think that he's right. They don't go for as much money typically as oil paintings do, and yet I think they probably take longer to paint and more difficult. Obviously, it's not very forgiving, and especially somebody that's as good as Ian is, and the detail and the color and the shadows, everything he's able to do with watercolor is just pretty incredible. We do a lot of his Europe paintings. He grew up in England.
I was born in England, and then in the early 50s, my mother and father, my brother and I immigrated to Canada, and we lived there for several years, and then we immigrated to the United States. Every time we made a move, it was because of my dad's work, because he just wanted to improve his situation in life. And we ended up in Cleveland, or in that area of Ohio. And then after several years there, several very good years, I really liked the Cleveland area. My dad got a job offer out in Utah, working for the Thiokol Chemical Corporation back in the days of the space race, and they were developing rocket engines and stuff like that. And so he came out and worked out here, and that's where I went to high school and went to college and started my working career. I got a degree as an architect. And then shortly after that, I decided I wanted to go back to England. So I went back for several years. And in the course of that time, I met my wife. And shortly after we got married, we came back to the United States because the situation in England was very difficult. The economy was very rough in the 70s. And we realized we couldn't have a life of our own. We'd have to depend on other people. So we came back to the United States, back to Utah, actually, where I knew people who would give me a job. I worked here for several years, and one day I just decided I wanted to be a painter instead of an architect. And that was in September of 1979, and I've been painting ever since.
We do very well with his paintings of England's fun little street scenes and pubs and different paintings like that. His local landscapes and landscapes around the Southwest cities, as well as the rural scenes. And I really like his stuff a lot. And then we do very, very well with his water scenes, his boats and harbor scenes. People love those. You just never know what a collector's looking for, what they like. Really, they're all so good when he brings them in. I just can't believe the quality of his work. I think he sells all over the country. I know a lot of galleries he's in Santa Fe, in Jackson Hole, Phoenix. He's in a lot of the Scottsdale. He's in a lot of the big markets. So I think, he's well known in the Southwest, and he does really well at the national shows, the national watercolor shows. Very well respected. I think you buy quality and buy good stuff, it always works out. I love the medium. I love watercolors, always have. It just amazes me when I see somebody that handles that medium so well, like as Ian does.
The medium takes a little bit of control. It almost controls you a little bit.
Yeah, I think watercolor, more so than with a lot of other forms of painting, the medium takes control of you, just because it is sometimes very unpredictable. I mean, there's some watercolor artists that are in incredible control. They know exactly what they're doing, but then there's a point where the painting takes over. When I teach a workshop, I lay out a plan of attack for the painting. Start with the sky wash, and then a foreground wash, and then sort of work your way into the details. Well, I think most artists in general, not all, but most do some kind of a layout sketch before they start. I tend to overlay out my work sometimes, but I don't always paint everything that I've drawn. But it's important to me that I create something that isn't necessarily 100% realistic, but represents a real a feeling, and to put the various aspects of a scene in there.
What do you have an opinion on why watercolor doesn't seem to be getting the prices that other mediums are getting?
I think it's what you kind of alluded to in that they're just underappreciated. And there are some problems with watercolor. And it used to be that the colors were very fugitive. If you left a watercolor out, the colors would fade. I remember seeing a Turner exhibit at the Tate Gallery in London years ago, and many of his great colors had been lost. But paints and paper are incredibly good now. They've been improved in many ways. You still don't want to leave a watercolor in bright sunlight. That's just not good. But the colors and the paints, the paper, especially paper, is so important, are incredibly good now, highly developed. So you don't have to worry about that. But one of the other problems with watercolors is the way they're framed.
Yeah, it's a more expensive process as a whole, really. I mean, unless you go to gold guild on the oil paintings or something like that. But with the matting, if you're putting double or triple mats on it and conservation glass, and then a good frame on it, it's fairly expensive. And a lot of people just don't like the glass, but you have to have glass on there with the watercolor to protect it, obviously, and as for the UV as well as just spills or anything on it.
Sure, watercolor has been around in different forms for centuries. I know that the homeland of watercolor is Britain, is England, but yet that's not where it started. I mean, it came from the continent. I believe that watercolor was brought from France, although I don't know that for sure. I read it somewhere. But, it's been around a long time because mixing pigments that are water soluble that you can put on a piece of paper or whatever, I'm sure people have been trying that for a lot longer than we can ever imagine.
So you mentioned China, and it makes sense that China and Japan, with their painting brushes for writing. You think that France developed watercolor before China and Japan?
No, I don't. No, I'm just thinking from what I've read, and that's somebody's opinion or somebody's research, was that the watercolor that has been so highly developed with British artists came from Europe. But that was just a step. Obviously, it's come from who knows where. Maybe it came from Turkey. Maybe it came from Russia. I think that was a stepping stone to Britain. And Britain is the country and my homeland and the artist that got me started. So that I kind of relate back to the great British watercolorists, many of whom are still alive today.
Speaking of Japan,
Mm-hmm.
You were doing some shows in a Japan gallery through France, or how did you end up over there?
I'm with a gallery in Carmel, California, New Masters Gallery. Great people, great friends of mine. And they were approached by a Japanese art entrepreneur one day saying, do you have artists that would be willing to come to Japan and let us sell their art? And they thought of me right away and contacted me, said, would you like to go to Japan? I said, sure, why not? Didn't think it was real. But I ended up going, I think, 6 times over a period of 5 years with the École de Paris art organization from Osaka. They ran art shows in department stores. They rent a large space in well-known department stores, which are a big deal in Japan, department stores. And they would sell a variety of art from artists and the work of some of the greats. I mean, they had Picassos, they had Chagalls, they had Utrillos and others, as well as mine. And they would invite an artist to be sort of like the resident artist for a few weeks. And we'd move from city to city. And I think we did shows in 16 different cities and sold a lot of my art in Japan. And I loved it. I love the Japanese people. I love Japan. It's incredible.
And so the Japanese department store, when I hear department store, I think of like Sears and JCPenney. And
well, they're fancy department stores. They're big. They're extremely immaculately laid out, like everything in Japan. And they have a very high reputation in that if you're associated with them, it's a good thing. There's nothing cheap and tawdry about department stores in Japan. They are top of the line in the world. And just being in them, and the gallery had, I mean, I'd be sitting there with my translator talking to various people, but there'd be like a staff of 10 or 15 salespeople selling all kinds of art for the shows in every city. It was very sophisticated and it impressed me a great deal.
So we're this Zoom is going to end us.
Well, thanks, Melchor. I appreciate your inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Okay, bye.